Hi everyone, I am Wafalango and welcome you all in Grammar in Detail. If you are new and not subscribe the channel, so subscribe the channel and press the bell icon to get some more videos about grammar. Today we will be discussing the ditransitive verb call from active voice into passive voice, how you are going to change it and that we will change. Before starting this, we will just put a glance on the definition of ditransitive verbs. Die means to, transitive which can be changed into passive voice, and verb which shows an action. So those verbs which need two objects and can be changed in passive voice into four ways, and we can change them into passive voice in how many ways? Four ways are called the die or detransitive verbs. Die-transitive verbs need one direct object and one indirect object. What is direct object? All non-livings are called direct object and all livings are called indirect object. Whatever the livings we have, those are known as indirect, and whatever the non-livings we have, those are called the direct object. So die-transitive verbs need two objects, one direct and one indirect. Why do they need one direct and one direct object? Because of if you put one of the objects, the meaning won't be clear and understandable. For example, you call me, the meaning is even clear that you call me, even the sense is not going towards you are calling something for me. You call me what? For example, I say you call a meeting. You call a meeting for whom? It is again not clear. So for that you need to bring indirect and direct object together to clear the meaning. You call me a meeting. Now this is what you call a meeting for whom? For me. You call me what? A meeting. So here the meaning is clear and understandable. We mostly bring the indirect object at the beginning, direct at the end. But if you want to shuffle the places, you want to bring the indirect at the end and direct at the beginning. So your indirect object me will be followed by a preposition, like you call a meeting for me. So these are the two ways to change them from active voice into active voice in two ways. Main target is how we are going to change it from active voice into passive voice. Today we have got ditransitive verb with modal auxiliary verb ought to. Ought to is the modal auxiliary verb. It is used for possibility, but it is less stressable than must. Must we use for 100% and ought to is used for 85%. Ought to is used for 85%. It is less stressable than must and more stressable than should. This should be in your mind when we will discuss should. So should is used for 75%, so it is more stressable than must and less stressable than should. So this is the way to change them. To discuss the possibility and the percentage, we are going to change it from active voice into passive voice. Before changing it from active voice into passive voice, we will just discuss the rules of what are the rules to change the active voice into passive voice. This subject doer of an action, when takes the place of object, here it becomes by you. Here it will not be called object, here it will be called agent. And what is the definition of agent? It tells us who does an action in a sentence. So keep in your mind your agent does something in a sentence, and here by you is your agent, not object. And when you bring your object, whether indirect means the living or direct non-living at the beginning, you bring it when at the beginning, like I and a meeting. So here it will not be called the doer of an action subject, but here it will be called the title and topic subject. And what is title and topic subject? A person, place or a thing in a sentence which we are talking about. Now in first and second sentence we are talking about I. In third and fourth sentence we are talking about meeting. And keep in your mind one thing should be in your mind. When you bring the indirect object in first and second sentence at the beginning, by you will come at the beginning, meeting at the end, meeting at the beginning, by you at the end. And when you bring meeting at the third and fourth sentence at the beginning, so by you comes at the beginning, for me at the end, for me at the beginning, by you at the end. The sentences will be changed in this way. I ought to be called by you a meeting. I ought to be called a meeting by you. A meeting ought to be called by you for me. A meeting ought to be called for me by you. Next we have got the negative sentences. Those sentences in which we deny the statement, reject the statement and refuse the statement are called negative sentences. You ought not to call me a meeting. You ought not to call a meeting for me. I ought not to be called by you a meeting. I ought not to be called a meeting by you. A meeting ought not to be called by you for me, and a meeting ought not to be called for me by you. Next we have got interrogative sentences. Those sentences in which we ask question and put queries are called interrogative sentences. Ought you to call me a meeting? Ought you to call a meeting for me? Ought I to be called by you a meeting? Ought I to be called a meeting by you? Ought a meeting to be called by you for me, and ought a meeting to be called for me by you. Next we have got formal sentences. Those sentences in which we ask question, deny the statement and we ask them in a formal way. Ought you not to call me a meeting? Ought you not to call a meeting for me? Ought I not to be called by you a meeting? Ought I not to be called a meeting by you? Ought a meeting not to be called by you for me, and ought a meeting not to be called for me by you. Next we have got informal sentences. Those sentences in which we ask question, deny the statement and we ask them in an informal way. And ought not short form is oughtn't, and then after subject to. Oughtn't you to call me a meeting? Oughtn't you to call a meeting for me? Oughtn't I to be called by you a meeting? Oughtn't I to be called a meeting by you? Oughtn't a meeting to be called by you for me, and oughtn't a meeting to be called for me by you. So these are the sentences of ditransitive verb call in modal auxiliary verb ought to, from active voice into passive voice. Hope you got today's lecture. Wish you best of luck. See you next time with next lecture. Goodbye.